Hello, everyone. I'm Valora Washington, CEO of the CAYL Institute, that is Community Advocates for Young Learners. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar today. We offer this webinar as a way to give you timely, relevant, and immediately actionable information that is relevant to the early childhood education field. We really thank you for joining our webinar series today. And we know many of you come to all of our webinars each month, and we're really grateful to have you. This webinar series is targeted toward early childhood education practitioners, administrators, and advocates. We come together as a community to really hear big picture thinking about important topics in our field. And in addition to that, all of you who participate and register will receive a follow-up email with resources that help you dig a little bit deeper into the topics that we explore. We offer this webinar without cost, but if you ever want to make a donation to the CAYL Institute, we welcome you to do that. And this month, we're particularly grateful to the Child Care Circuit of Massachusetts, which is helping to sponsor this particular webinar. At CAYL, we have many values that we cling very closely to. We are very strongly committed to representative leadership, to diversity, to impact and innovation, and to thinking about solutions and building and sharing knowledge. And today's focus on our topic of understanding and knowing what we can do about the upcoming fiscal cliff is an example of how we like to share knowledge and focus on solutions. Many practitioners in our field have heard about this fiscal cliff, but are really uncertain about what it is and what it means to them. And because we're not powerless in the face of anything happening in our field, we really want to focus on what we can actually do about this fiscal cliff long before it might possibly happen. Because knowledge is power, and the power of our knowledge is multiplied when it is shared. That's why this webinar series is focused on bringing top leaders in our field and people who have experience dealing with these issues to share information with us. Information is the data and the details that we share with you, but more than information, we also want to tap into the knowledge, your knowledge, the knowledge of our presenters, and the experience and context of the research, the policy, and the practitioners who can understand the data and the information. This helps all of us because we are gaining timely, relevant, and immediately actionable information and knowledge that helps us to build our collective competence, build our collective intelligence, helps us to collaborate. When we have shared knowledge, it helps us build together. And when we collaborate, we can find solutions and we can be more productive and more effective. And that helps us to build a community of a learning culture, which is really important in our profession. So as we start today's webinar, we'd like to ask you to really just share with us what brings you to today's webinar on the fiscal cliff. What are you concerned about? What do you want to learn more about? Let us know. So when we think about the fiscal cliff, of course, it involves money. Money matters in early childhood education. This is a field that's been classically underfunded, that has been devastated by COVID, and we generally lack the infrastructure for a full recovery. So yes, we are unapologetic when we say that money matters. And many people have pointed out that if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. So there is a lot of historic and significant financial relief that federal and state governments gave us over this COVID period. And when they gave us the money, it came from several sources, mostly the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Appropriation Act, and the American Rescue Plan. And what we have learned is that this funding that was provided, all of this emergency funding, it did some really good things in the field. It facilitated facility improvements, technology integration. There were program expansions. Staff compensation came out of this funding. And there were very many policy changes that also emerged. So this billions of dollars of emergency financial relief was so crucial to the survival of our industry. enabling many of our childcare providers and early childhood programs to either open or stay open. And it was really important that this funding existed. But even with this vital support, the devastation to our field during the COVID era is very difficult to exaggerate. COVID relief funding did teach us one thing, though, and it taught us that state and federal governments really can provide significant increases to the financial infrastructure of our field on a much larger scale. Much of this funding, this emergency funding, is scheduled to end in September 2024. That's what the fiscal cliff is all about. Because if this funding ends, as you know, it will be, again, very devastating for all of us in the field because our pandemic recovery is far from assured. There is no state that is immune to the effects of this fiscal cliff. It is going to hit every state. And so our next level advocacy strategies are really going to need to focus on how we turn this potential fiscal cliff into a bridge, which is going to lead to more permanent investments in early childhood education and the infrastructure of our field. I really like the way that Jim Heckman put it. He says he's not focused on the moral aspects of early childhood education, but the fact that our field offers practical value and how it makes so much sense to our nation and how it generates so many resources in our nation. So at the CAYL Institute, we're also committed to generating knowledge, and we have many resources that are available to discuss many of the important issues of our field, and it really focuses on lessons learned from fellow educators like you. And so today, we want to turn our attention to this idea of the fiscal cliff. And our webinar today is part of a series on leadership dilemmas. Last month, we focused on how we can leverage Latinx leadership. This month, we're going to explore this vital topic of how we leverage funding for our field and deal with the fiscal cliff. And I invite you to come back in July where we're going to explore this issue of next generation leadership in the early childhood education field. So for now, I'm really excited to hear our dynamic speakers, our knowledgeable experts, share with us information about the fiscal cliff. And we're going to begin with Amanda Guarino. We're thrilled to have her and the deep policy knowledge that she can share with all of us. She is the Managing Director of Policy and National Partnerships of the First 5 Years Fund. Her role works fully, actively inform, build, and advance federal policy that strengthens our field and that strengthens quality early learning opportunities for children. She is quite an adept policy expert. She has 2 decades of knowledge and expertise in early childhood education that includes actually crafting legislation, dealing with government relations, doing federal advocacy, and providing technical assistance. So we are thrilled to have her. Before she went to the First 5 Years Fund, she spent 12 years in the Federal Department of Health and Human Services, where she had a very crucial role in the Administration for Children and Families, managing programs and initiatives that support many of the programs that are so important to all of us. And it is with deep sadness that I have to announce to you today that due to an unforeseeable emergency that happened today, Dr. Leah Austin is not going to be able to join us. She sends her apologies, quite an unavoidable situation. So we're sending her all of our best wishes. And our next speaker will be Dr. Devanya Govan-Hunt. Dr. Devanya Govan-Hunt has many leadership positions. She's president of the Charlotte, North Carolina Bilingual Preschool Board of Directors. She's president and CEO of the Charlotte affiliate of the National Black Child Development Institute. She served on Leading for Opportunity Council as an early care and education expert. She works with Think for Babies North Carolina. She has very many important roles in the field, and so we're delighted to have her perspective. Before we hear from our speakers today, I want to remind everyone that this webinar is recorded Many of our practitioners are with children right now and they listen to it at another time that's convenient for them. We also have closed captioning. I want to advise all of you that near the end of this webinar, we will put in the link in the chat, a link. If you want to join a Q&A session to interact directly with our speakers, please click that and join us. And please write in the chat because we're going to have a group conversation and we can be answering questions that you bring forward. So now let's turn our attention to this issue of the fiscal cliff. Many of you have asked, what is this cliff all about? We're going to answer that question today. Many of you have asked, what's the impact of this cliff going to be on our program or on our workforce? We're going to answer that today. People want to know who might be affected by this cliff. We're going to answer that today as well. We're going to address questions today about the federal role in this fiscal cliff, what state and localities are doing, and advocacy strategies that we might take as we address this serious issues. So will you please join me in welcoming Amanda and Devanya, who are going to share information with us today. And so I would just really like to first ask Amanda. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. We're delighted to have your expertise. What's happening with this fiscal cliff? Tell us all about it.
Hi, Valora. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here today with this amazing panel and with your amazing institution organization. So thank you all for tuning in. And I thought the best way to start would be to talk a little bit about who I am and what is the organization that I work for. So like Valora mentioned, my name is Amanda Guarino, and I am the Managing Director for Policy and National Partnerships at the First 5 Years Fund here in Washington, D.C. The First 5 Years Fund works to sustain and expand support for early learning that exists at the federal level. So identifying and advancing new and interesting and innovative ways to increase and access high quality early childhood education for children, especially children from low income families. We help work to think about and align the best practices that are happening out in the field with the best possible policies that we can implement here in DC, and work with advocacy groups and policymakers, both Republicans and Democrats, to identify federal solutions that work for children, families, and taxpayers, as well as states and communities. Early childhood development, as Valora mentioned, is practical and it's a nonpartisan issue. Everyone really comes to the table when we go to the Capitol Hill to talk about what are the needs of early childhood education. This was brought, and a bright hot spotlight was shown on this issue during the pandemic. So we collaborate with a diverse range of federal and state advocates, businesses and other thought leaders and think tanks and policymakers to build consensus and to craft early childhood policies that provide lasting economic and social returns, and hopefully are reflecting what is happening in the fields, both in your programs and in your communities. I think that's why this conversation from the federal level to the practitioner level is so important and needs to happen more and more. So I think another question that I've been asked is, so with everything that's going on in the world, I mean, what is important to the First 5 Years Fund? And there are a couple of things that we really find important. We find the Child Care and Development Block Grant, which is the main source of childcare funding in this country, a really important thing, something that we're working really hard on. Head Start, early Head Start childcare partnerships, and the preschool development grants, which exist in a number of states across the country. We're working every day to educate policymakers on the power of high quality early childhood programs, supporting legislation that improves quality and access to ECE and strengthens the early childhood workforce. We're working every day on your behalf to make sure that the key linchpin piece of quality in this country is our workforce. And if we can't support our workforce, how is our workforce supposed to support our children? And we're always looking for avenues of bipartisanship. That is really one of the only ways to make progress here in Washington, D.C., is to go back to the traditional ways of doing business where Republicans and Democrats come together and support an issue, bringing both of their sets of ideas and understandings and come out with something that they can both progress and work with in their states. We know that the current tenor and what you're hearing in the news and on social media everywhere across the country is that, things are a little scary and uncertain in this country. But, there are a couple of things to highlight. Congress passed a budget in December of 2022 with meaningful increases in funding for early childhood programs. We know, based on a lot of research that FFYF and some of our partners have done, based on 2 large national polls, we did them immediately following the 2022 midterm elections, that voters and small business owners across the political spectrum overwhelmingly endorsed the federal government taking action on childcare. And there has been significant, and I should say unprecedented, media attention on the childcare crisis. If you had told me before the pandemic that the childcare crisis would be front page of newspapers and the Sunday and Saturday morning news programs, I would have told you were absolutely crazy, that we were people who made it work because it had to work for us, and that we were never going to be front page, even though we deserved to be. With everything that came to light within the pandemic and the importance of childcare facing every single person in this country, not just working moms and dads, to members of Congress, doctors, nurses, firemen, it became something that everyone could relate to across the country, no matter what your stature or position in life was. So I thought it would be interesting to dig in on a couple of the things I mentioned here, and Valora led us with before we started the webinar. So the administration, which is, the Biden administration and the Biden-Harris administration, which currently also is the administration of HHS, and that's the Department of Health and Human Services, and the organizations within them that control the programs that I talked about earlier. Expanding access to quality and affordable early childhood is a top priority for this administration. You've probably heard, though, of the term fiscal cliff, and Valora did an amazing job to kind of define what that means, especially for our early learning environment. And the fiscal cliff refers to, it's a critical imbalance between the amount of money that we're spending versus the amount of money that we have coming in. So revenues versus obligations. Many of you who run early childhood programs, this is not a foreign concept to you, because you're constantly struggling with the imbalances between revenues and obligations. This is just that happening on a larger scale. So it creates this looming budget deficit and shortfall. Some are referencing this in the context of what you're also hearing, the term debt limit, flying around a lot. And that's something that's taking place across the entire country and at the federal level beyond just early learning programs. But this also is happening as it pertains to the childcare investments, those monumental critical investments that were made during the pandemic to the early learning field. There were $52 billion worth of investments in early childhood education during the pandemic. Those dollars will not be sustained into the future. It's unfortunate. We fought for it. We saw it come up in the president's Build Back Better Act, which unfortunately the childcare piece didn't continue into the end result of that bill at the end of last year. But what the government is going to do to maintain these gains made in early learning is something that we really are interested in. And we don't think, I always say there's more than one way to skin a cat, that we don't need necessarily the big program that we had hoped for when we had the opportunity in the reconciliation plan, but there are other ways to continue to the support for early learning within the context of the federal government without letting our program fall off that fiscal cliff. There are other investments that can be made and other ways that myself and my organization at the federal level can work with your help in the states and localities. So we all need to be in this together in order for us to save the program from going over this fiscal cliff. The president has really anteed up. I should say that, in March, he included substantial increases in funding for key early learning programs in his budget. There was an additional $908 million for CCDBG, $1.1 billion for Head Start, and $45 million for the preschool development grants birth through 5. This significant funding request for CCDBG alone estimated that it would allow high quality early childhood to reach an additional 500,000 children. Of course, the reality is, like I said, the things you're hearing in the news and the things you're seeing on your social media feed is that we have a Republican controlled House of Representatives, and that means the fact President Biden is a Democrat the president's budget is highly unlikely to be passed by lawmakers. But the budget is an important opportunity for the administration to talk about what its priorities are. And early childhood education is definitely one of them. Another thing the president did was in April, through a series of what you call executive orders, President Biden directed nearly every cabinet level agency to use funds that they have in programs to expand access to care, both child care and elder care. So there were child care directives sought to make child care more affordable, expand access to high quality early learning programs, and support the workforce. So the workforce specifically, there were directives from the president, directly from the president of the United States to HHS to increase compensation for educators, to increase subsidy reimbursement rates, to expand efforts to ensure childcare workers have access to health insurance and retirement benefits, and to implement strategies to support the well-being and expand the mental health supports for early childhood education workforce. So executive orders, they don't have kind of the teeth and the meat behind them that laws and bills do, but it shows you where the president's mind is. It lets you know that the Biden administration is poised and ready to move forward on its priorities without congressional approval. And this is one of the powers that the president has. The only problem with these things, it does show that the president is really dedicated, but unfortunately there's no new funding that comes with executive orders. It kind of puts the onus back on us to figure out how we can work better within the current system that we have. So in Congress, they've been slow to act. This is not news to anyone who's, in the news or, flipping through your social media feed. It's been really hard because there's also something called the debt limit that's been looming. Democrats in Congress have introduced two major pieces of legislation to overhaul the early learning system. The Child Care for Working Families Act was introduced by Senator Murray, and the Child Care for Every Communities Act was introduced by Senator Warren. Both are unlikely to move in a split Congress, but again, shows that Congress is really committed to early learning. These are things that would completely transform our early learning system, would fund them completely in a way that would be fair to providers, that would offer the workforce a competitive living wage in high quality settings, but they're also really, really, really expensive. And because we're talking about this fiscal cliff environment, it's really probably not reasonable to think that they would pass right now, but it still means it's something that our government, including our Congress, support. So there have been a number of other bipartisan bills, and I'm happy to talk about them in depth, either in our question and answer or a little bit later. There's an after hours Child Care Act to make sure that parents who are looking for care outside the traditional hours are getting that care, and that programs are being given the resources they need to meet the needs of the parents. There's also another act, it's called the Small Business Child Care Investment Act. The bill would amend the Small Business Investment Act so that nonprofit childcare providers could participate as a small business. The other thing I wanted to mention as we talk about, all this gloom and doom that's, resonating throughout the United States, is that 2 weeks ago, Representatives Ashley Hinson from, so there's Representative Ashley Hinson, Susan Bonamici, Joaquin Castro, and Brian Fitzpatrick, this is all members of the House of Representatives, launched the Pre-K and Child Care Caucus together with FFYF. We can, after the webinar, we can send you all some pictures. It was really fun because in addition to the members of Congress, we were also joined by Elmo Grover and Daniel Tiger from PBS. So this was showing that this caucus initially launched in 2016, and this is showing bipartisanship, that 4 members of the House of Representatives, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, were really willing to come together to find things that would work on both sides of the aisle. Quickly to talk about the debt limit, which is the looming, kind of even bigger than our childcare crisis, because without a debt limit, it's like when your credit card is maxed out, you're not going to get any more. You're not going to be able to charge something else. You're going to be declined. So the House, over the weekend, President Biden and Speaker McCarthy struck a deal. And then last night, the House overwhelmingly passed a bill to raise the debt limit until 2025, but it's fiscal year 2024. So that kind of gets a little bit confusing. So it's about 2 years. to raise your credit card limit, the United States credit card limit, for 2 years. What that means that we're going to have to kind of tighten our buckles and tighten our belts a little bit. So many programs were had their funding cut, but luckily I can say that CCDBG, the childcare funding, has been protected. It doesn't mean that we'll see big increases from this point over the next few years, but we were really lucky in the FY23 budget to get those numbers that I talked about earlier in the talk. 1.8 billion additional dollars came into childcare. Some other programs are taking a 1% cut to the funding, so they're going to have some really difficult decisions. Really happy to report, based on a lot of advocacy that FFYF and other organizations did on Capitol Hill, that we were able to protect our funding because Congress is now on board. They know that you cannot mess with childcare funding. You cannot mess with these programs, that people need these programs to work. So that fiscal cliff has kind of been like shaved off a little bit. It's not like a severe drop off. We're going to talk about trying to leveling the cliff a little bit. So we protected our money, and that we'll see as years pass and as time passes, if we're able to kind of grow those funding pots again while we decrease our deficit. This is a lot of really in-depth, kind of in the weeds information, but I thought it was really important for you to understand how the federal government is here to support you. And I think, I would love to talk more in our question and answer a little bit later about the things that you can do as providers and parents to engage with your members of Congress, and how important you are to them, because you are their constituents. You are the ones that are voting for them. So the things that you need for your families, your communities, and your businesses should be top of the list for them. So we could talk about that a little bit later and dive into it. But in the meantime, I think I should probably end it here, and I'm going to toss it over to Devanya, who's going to talk a little bit about a different perspective in the fiscal cliff.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you to the CAYL Institute and Dr. Washington for having me as a part of this amazing panel and this super important discussion. I just cannot say how excited and thrilled I am to be able to bring the voice of providers for early education practitioners to families to this platform. We've been hearing a lot of language that's used, bipartisan, fiscal cliff, all of these different terms and terminology that's used from the top down, using a top-down approach. And most of the time when we're out in the field having conversations with our child care providers, with those who are on the ground serving children and families day in and day out with everything they have, when we have the opportunity to hear from families about what they need in terms of early care and education, what they need from our communities, from our states, from our government, from the feds, in order to grow whole, healthy children that will then become contributors to our society, we hear a slightly different story in terms of what support might look like. So before I get into some of the stories that I am going to share perspectives from those constituents that we have the opportunity to talk to on a daily basis, I will share a little bit about what we do here at BCDI Charlotte. We have the awesome opportunity of being one of more than 24 villages across the country under the leadership of Dr. Leah Austin with the National Black Child Development Institute. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the National Black Child Development Institute, we have been serving our communities for over 50 years. For over 50 years, we've been at the forefront of leading policymakers and professionals, parents, families around critical issues that respond to the unique strengths and needs of Black children and families. Our villages have been partners in delivering culturally relevant and responsive resources that respond to our unique strengths and our unique needs, especially in fields of early care and education, health and wellness, literacy, policy issues, family and community engagement, and so much more. So we are always excited to be able to bring lived experiences and those perspectives to any conversation when it comes to decisions that are being made for our communities and our families and not with our communities and our families. So this fiscal cliff, when we're out talking to providers and families, the first thing that we like to understand is how much they understand about what's happening. And what they understand about what's happening, how will it directly impact them personally and professionally? How will it affect the people that they're serving? How will it affect them keeping their doors open? What will the field of early care and education look like without the financial supports, that $52 billion that Amanda just mentioned a few minutes ago? What would it look like without that support moving forward? We live in a completely different world now. There were some things that were happening and that was very unstable in terms of how equitable early care and education was across the field here before COVID hit, right? Unfortunately, we used COVID as an opportunity to say, you know what, this thing has been turned upside down. We got to do something different. When in reality, it really just kind of exacerbated what was already happening. So when we talk to people, we say, you know, how much do you understand? What does this mean to you? And our providers will quickly tell us that we are worried about whether or not we're going to be able to retain the teachers that we've hired, whether or not we're going to be able to support our children and our families by giving them teachers who feel like they can come in and give their best every single day. They quickly share that they don't know if they're going to be able to keep their doors open. And this not includes a traditional childcare center. This includes our family home providers. This includes those who are delivering care in spaces that have titles like family, friends, and neighbor care or kin care. The story is the same across the board. And this doesn't just affect one community, it affects all of us. For some reason, when we're talking about whether or not our government should actually continue to fund early care and education the way that it has been, whether or not they should listen to the folks who are on the ground delivering these services, they fail to realize that early care and education it should not be a privilege. Equitable early care and education is a public good. So it doesn't just affect one community, it affects everybody. It affects everybody. I'm gonna say it one more time for the people sitting in the back. It affects everyone. So our providers, when they share with us whether or not they're going to be able to keep their doors open, or when we ask them, are your families understanding what you're dealing with, what you're up against? Do they understand when you use language like fiscal cliff? Do they understand what it means when you say stabilization grants may not be around much longer? So you don't know whether or not you're going to be able to support the mental health of the teachers that are being placed in front of their children, whether or not you are going to be able to create a work environment or maintain a work environment where teachers can come in and not only feel supported and show up as their best self, but they can do the very important brain building work that they show up to do every single day. They scratch their heads and they say, you know what? I don't know. I'm not sure if they do. Some of our providers even respond to us and say, you know what? I thought maybe I was the only one in this situation. So we have the opportunity to let them know this does not just affect you, it affects all of us. It affects your coworkers that are down the street from you or in another neighborhood. We want to make sure that they feel empowered to operationalize their voice, to operationalize their passion, to operationalize their lived experiences and their stories. So as an organization that's out on the ground, gathering these stories, as an organization that's out in communities, you know, making sure that we provide the very best support and resources for our early care and education providers, for our families. The first thing that we tell them, and I'm gonna go back and allude to something that Amanda said just a few minutes ago, you know, your legislators work for you. You voted them in office. So the first thing that we can do is to remind you that this situation that you're facing right now, inability to maintain wages, inability to continue to offer bonuses for your staff, inability to the struggle that you're dealing with in order to maintain low tuition so that your families can afford to actually be able to come into the program that they choose and want for their children. If we're talking about equity, right? This is not a you situation. But what you can do is operationalize your voice. That means Share your story. Share your story. We have to be able to help those who are sitting behind their desk every single day, making decisions for our families, for our communities, and not with them, connect what they know is the right thing to do. We have to be able to help them connect their head knowledge with their heart knowledge. That's what we tell them. We know that lasting change is often led by families. Your families will walk with you. They will walk beside you. They will walk ahead of you in order to help make sure that they can get what's right and what they want and what they need for their children and their families. We tell our providers that we can help build solutions. We don't just have to adopt resolutions or go along with the status quo, because we're not supposed to say that this is a challenge for us out loud. We can actually write our legislators. We can actually record stories from your families, teach your families how to write letters to the legislators, remind them that in the palm of their hand, they have the opportunity to shift this thing around. And if the folks that you're writing don't respond to your lived experiences where you are on the ground, if the folks that you are calling out to and sharing that this is something that we need in order to make sure that we are growing whole, healthy citizens for our society moving forward, then you need to vote them out. You need to vote them out. That's what we say, vote them out. They work for you. Lasting change is led by families. Program expansion is something that's necessary. Increased wages is necessary. Staff retention is necessary. We are not just babysitting. We are not just keeping children. Folks are trying to go to work. We're trying to support our corporate communities. Listen, the question that we always have, and I'm about to start jumping around here in a minute, so let me know when I'm running out of time. The question that we have is, how are we always talking about building businesses? How are we always talking about bringing more businesses to our communities? How are we always talking about making sure that our states are good places to start these businesses, and childcare is not a part of that conversation? That's confusing to me. Because where are we going to put the children? You're going to keep them in your living room. You're going to teach them to read and write. You're going to support families with mental health. Where are we putting the children? This needs to be a part of the conversation. How is it that you can sit behind the desk, right, and talk and ignore this fiscal cliff, push paper around a desk and say, oh, this is a bipartisan issue, and we do hear the people. But at the same time, we got providers out here, fighting tooth and nail in order to be able to serve the very people that voted you into office. They're out here giving everything that they can of their own funds in order to make sure that they create work environments that are supportive of mental health for their workers. Because we got adults that are standing in front of children, building brains every single day, building brains and helping to secure foundations and supporting families and doing every single thing that we ask of them to do, on top of securing more education, but we can't pay them a living wage. That makes absolutely no sense to me at all. So we remind our providers and our families, we remind our providers first, you have a voice, it matters. Your lived experiences are important. They are not always unique to your situation in your corner of the earth, because somebody else is out here struggling with the same situation. Share your story, write your legislators. You have the power to do that. We tell our families, if you want to continue to choose what you want for your child, for your family, if we want to be able to, you want to continue to send your child to this particular program because choice is important. If we're going to continue to say out loud that we believe our parents are our children's first and most important educator and lifelong advocate, we have got to be able to let them walk into the power that they bring to that situation. Let them know what's going on and use layman terms for them, because they will fight for you. They will fight for you. Just like your vote counted when those folks got in office, their vote counted the same way. We've got to be able to lead them into that. They will wisely talk to them, operationalize them. Remember I said before, lasting change is led oftentimes by families, and it has to be a ground up and a top down approach at the same time. So don't feel like you're alone. If you don't understand the terminology that's being used, Call someone and ask someone for help, because it's important that we understand how to operationalize our voice, to activate your voice, to activate your families. The thing that I am going to lead with is a African proverb that NBCDI uses in their family empowerment program when they're working with families. And at the end of those sessions, when we're talking about how we build stronger communities, at the end of those family empowerment sessions, when we talk about how important it is for families to have choice and autonomy on how their children are being educated or served, or how our providers show up in communities, we tell them, you must act as if it is impossible to fail. I'm gonna say it one more time because I think it's powerful. And if we lean into it, we probably can move some dirt on a lot of things when it comes to this fiscal cliff and everything else early childhood education. We must act as if it is impossible to fail. Share your story, activate your voice, weaponize, and that is a strong term, your families, because they will march with you. Act as if it is impossible to fail. If they don't listen to you, vote them out. And I am supposed to turn it over to someone right now.
Great. It's all good. Thank you, Devanya. I love the energy that you've brought to it. And I just want to start. Thank you, Amanda, for the information you've provided, and Devanya for telling us how we can get involved to really avoid this fiscal cliff and turn it into a bridge of sustainability. I love the proverb that you shared. You must act as if it is impossible to fail. And I'm going to add on to that. We have a Rabbi Schuler who wrote in a book also, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? What would you do? And so this whole issue of the fiscal cliff, this funding is scheduled to end September 2024. We are bringing this to our attention now because now is the time to advocate. Now is the time for our colleagues like Amanda to do what they're doing to help move the ball forward. I think we're going to get a hashtag going across America called Vote Them Out, Devanya. People are really interested in that. I want to just raise a few technical questions that people are asking. This whole debt ceiling conversation, we're just now learning what was really voted on the other day. One of the things that someone's asking is they're asking about whether that debt ceiling deal included rescinding unspent ARPA funds. So can you talk with us about that, Amanda, and the implications of rescinding unspent ARPA funds?
Thank you for the question. And Devon, I just have to say, every time I'm on a webinar or a talk, when I am joined I'm in the presence, I should say, of a provider and parents, and you all are the ones that are doing the work. And I feel so inspired after I hear from people like Devanya. I mean, I was like grin to grin, ear to ear grinning over here, listening to what you say, because you're 100% right. And it's hard because you think it's an us and a them, and it's not. Like, this is America, and your representatives are just that. They represent you. And it's hard to see yourself in some of these things because you don't see yourself necessarily in these people, right? We're trying to bridge this gap. We're trying to have more women. We're trying to have more people of color. But when you still look at Capitol Hill, you see 70 and 80-year-old white men. So it's hard to kind of think that you can make that change. But I assure you, you can make that change. I am similarly with FFYF, I am your representative here. I can talk about what best policy and practices is till the cows come home. Unless you're telling me this will work in your communities and this will work for you as a provider, there's no point in me knocking down doors on Capitol Hill to try to get that done. So we need to hear from you. And that's kind of like what Devanya was saying, that top down, bottom up. I need you to push up to me and tell me we need this will work, this won't work. Because some of these bills, are kind of written in a little bit of a vacuum, and they're not doing their due diligence to figure out, will they work? You know, I can say that this is best policy and the science says this and the research and the polling says this, but that doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. So as much as you possibly can, try to engage. And I always tell people, or I think about, like, we always talk about, what is that child going to be? I'm worried about what my child is going to be, but we're forgetting that that child is someone right now. And we have to embrace what that child is right now, because they're not going to be much of anything unless we take care of them now. So I will stop my rant, but I just thank you, Devanya. That was great. So the rescission, which we're calling in DC, is called the clawback. It's something that was written into this bill. Luckily, the way I'm reading it, and it's still yet to be 100% determined, so don't quote me on it until the bill is passed. But the way it's written in the House bill that did pass last night is that because the child care funding, particularly that relief funding, went out and left the federal government bank account and went into states, there is little to no way that the federal government can claw that back. Because if you check the HHS's bank account, it's not there, it's within states. So they would have to then check 50 plus 6 territories bank accounts and then claw that money back. Not something they're going to do. So because it left HHS and went into the states should be okay. The one thing we did hear during, there was a hearing yesterday that this did come up, was that there's about $18 billion of this $52 billion that went out that's still unspent. That's not a great look. So we need to spend down that money. We need to be able to show members of Congress that states and territories and commonwealths and tribes are doing great things with that money. So when we have the opportunity again to advocate for more money, that we have kind of the proof that shows, if you give it to them and if you show and empower people to say, here's the funding that you need to run high quality programs, that they will do it. That we are in a deficit model right now, and the way our system works, it's just a monumental system failure, that there's more need than there is supply. It costs more than people can afford. And the only way to kind of bridge that gap is to have some sort of federal intervention that kind of meets you in the middle. So that's what I can say about that. I could say that there probably is a little bit of money that's laying within the federal government bank account, maybe for some TA or for some research, that will probably disappear, but it's not anything that people in states should feel. And that's at least the way the House bill is written right now.
Thank you for that response, because even if you read the media accounts, it's talking a lot about the clawback. And so I really want to know what that means with this unspent funds.
And that's just what as it pertains to childcare. So I should say that we fought really hard to say that you cannot take this money back. They were, you know, in states, it takes a long time to obligate money. It takes a long time to find the right consultant or contractor to do the task or project that you set out to do. So we fought to make sure that that wasn't included in the clawback, but I can't say the same for other programs. So for childcare, it shouldn't be a problem.
Mm-hmm. I have another question that's coming up, and I wonder if either of you can really speak to the issue of states, because one of the things that I think I'm noticing is how states are trying to step up in some really new ways. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I do think that that our states are trying to step up in some really unique ways. I think that more states are moving towards listening, like really making an attempt to listen to providers and families, to listen to practitioners, and figure out these, figure out ways to fund this and support them in ways that they haven't before. If we look at the way things were done in the past here, just a couple of years ago, it was always, let's make the decisions and tell them what's going to be done. But from what I can hear, see, and what I've experienced is that they're really calling in and saying, calling providers, calling those different voices to the table to say, tell us what you're experiencing, tell us what this means to you, tell us what you want, what you need, how we can support you. And let's see if we can find a really good middle ground.
Okay.
Other thing states are doing is that states are kind of anteing up where the federal government is not. So states have seen the success within their communities of the relief funding, and they're deciding to use, in their legislative and budget process to make that investment. Instead of waiting for the government to act, the federal government to act, they're going to kind of, in states like New Mexico, Vermont, DC, they've decided that their state budgets will take care of that, what would have been that cliff in the state. So their state budget will meet where the federal government funding would have expired, so that programs can continue to operate. And because, we live in a republic, it's a state by state decision how some of these decisions are made, but we're seeing really amazing things happening in the state, but states can't do it alone. That the federal government funding, this Child Care and Development Block Grant, that large swath of money is really the foundation that goes into states, and then states have the ability to kind of build their programs on top of that. But it's such a huge chunk of money that it's really, really paramount that that money is there and continues to increase, so states can continue to build upon it. And there's that great kind of public-private federal-state partnership.
Mhm. And just building upon what Devanya said, I mean, it has been very inspiring to see how states have stepped up. But again, it is state by state. And if you live in state X, you may have opportunity that you do not have if you live in state Y. So I want to point out what Devanya said. Isn't early childhood education something that all of our children deserve wherever they live? And that is a longer term part of our agenda. But at the CAYL Institute, we really believe in universal access to tuition-free early childhood education for all children everywhere. And we never want to lose sight of that, even as we celebrate what's happening on a state-by-state basis.
And Dr. Washington, I always find it, I have to chuckle to myself. And I guess I chuckle because I don't want to scream or use colorful language out loud in the public. But when we're talking about long-term early childhood campaigns and work, when we're talking about lasting change, when we're talking about burning old systems down and rebuilding them, innovative approaches to early care and education, it is always striking to me that one of the biggest hurdles we always have to face in systems change work, because this is what this sounds like, systems change work, what you just mentioned, are mindsets.
Mhm.
Our mindsets. We are still massaging individuals within states, across states, that early care and education, high quality defined the way that families define high quality, not the way that we define high quality. Early childhood education is a public good and that it benefits everyone. We are still massaging people that if we're going to use the term equity, because we've been loving to toss that term around here for the past couple of years, it's real sexy to say, oh, it's equity, it's about equity, that we really have to be able, in every state, if we're going to be the great country that we want to be and that we claim to be, we have got to be able to meet folks where they are. We've got to be able to understand that early childhood education is critical. It's critical. It is critical. It touches families. It touches so many different aspects of growing whole, healthy children. So mindsets is one of those biggest hurdles, and it looks different from state to state, not because of dollars, but because of folks who just don't get it yet, who hadn't connected what they know to be the right thing up here to what's in here.
Well, I can use Amanda and Devanya and the National Black Child Development Institute, Charlotte chapter, and the First 5 Years Fund. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I want to invite everyone, as we're wrapping up now, that I want to invite everyone, you will see in the chat a link that as soon as this webinar is over, you can click that link and join Amanda and Devanya and ask your personal questions. That we really want to be sure that each and every one of you, and that we as an early childhood education community have awareness of what's going on, that we know the questions to ask in our states and communities, and that we're willing to step forward with our leadership to make a difference, and to make a difference now while we can. So we want to address this fiscal cliff issue. Please join us in the conversation that we're going to have by clicking the link. We also invite you to join us July 13th when we talk about next generation of early childhood education leaders. What's the hope we have and the dilemmas we face as we build that next generation of leaders? We thank you so much, all of us at the CAYL Institute. Thank you for joining us. And a special shout out to people in Massachusetts. If you are in Massachusetts, you may qualify for priority status for a child care voucher. And we also want to help you think about how you might more get involved in accepting state subsidies. So please contact Child Care Circuit, go to one of their information sessions and see how you might participate in these programs. Once again, thank you for learning with the CAYL Institute today on behalf of our entire team. We're very grateful for your interest and participation in this webinar series and hope to see you next month as we talk about early childhood leadership, the next generation. Join us in the chat in the Q&A session by clicking the link. Thank you so much and good night.